There's once again, this article that we've talked about with Square Enix. Jacob Navok or Navok, I'm not sure. CEO Genvid, previously president's office and director of business at Square Enix Holdings, reported to the CEO, which is, it's an interesting thing. Like, he's got a lot of insider information and stuff. So what he says is a thread on the recent Square Enix news regarding Final Fantasy sales numbers and expectations. Basically, this was just a series of reports that came out describing how Final Fantasy 16, Rebirth, and Foam Stars failed to meet expectations. Foam Stars didn't really surprise anybody. Skins were like 40, 50 bucks. They were stupid expensive, and the game wasn't even that interesting to begin with. So it was basically just like a super hyper monetized Splatoon, and that's about it. So shocker, it didn't do that great. Final Fantasy 16, huge game, very expensive game, and it just didn't really captivate a lot of people. Hardcore Final Fantasy players really ate it up and enjoyed it, and the big spectacle and set piece stuff, but it didn't really appeal to more mainstream gamers or more casual gamers. And then Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it seems like something similar happened where Final Fantasy fans ate it up, gobbled it up, loved it because it was very good, and then nobody else really bit into it. It did not appeal to a new audience. It just reappealed to the people who played Remake, and it didn't really grow or improve upon that, which I think we all kind of saw coming. It's like it's part 2 of a 3-part trilogy of remakes of a single game. So there's some people that are sitting on the sidelines until all the parts are done and they can just play them all through at once. There's other people that, in the few years that have passed since the remake came out, they never played the remake, and then they were like, oh, Rebirth looks good, but I feel like I should play the first thing first. So I'll play the remake now, and then I'll play Rebirth later, and I'll get it on sale. And so there's just a lot of reasons why people didn't buy into it, and it caused it to not meet their expectations. At least that's what it seems to be. However, Jacob Navok, again, I feel bad I don't know his name. I'm just going to call him Jacob. As a reminder, I reported to 2 CEOs of Square Enix for the better part of a decade and ran a subsidiary. I also correctly predicted last year that Square Enix was going to break exclusivity. I'll note I have no confidential information that I'm basing my arguments on. To start, we need to look at at decisions made on the titles under development within the lens of 2015 to 2022, not the lens of 2023. For example, Final Fantasy 16 would have started pre-production prior to the release of Final Fantasy 15, which was released in 2016. I think this is important for everybody to remember. These huge games like a Final Fantasy 16, a God of War Ragnarok, a Starfield, like whatever you're looking at, these games take years and years and years and years to produce. And so most of the big decisions on how they will work and the broader strategy is done like a decade ahead of time, which is why, like, to run a really successful gaming business specifically, you have to have a visionary usually at the helm. You have to have somebody that can see where the industry is going before it's there and before even the gamers know what they will want. It's like Steve Jobs used to say, where he's like, most people want new products, but they don't know what those products are until you show it to them. It's like, our job is to create those magical products and show it to them and make them realize they wanted this thing that they didn't know that they wanted. So you have to have a visionary who can figure out what that thing is before anybody else and plan for it a decade ahead of time, right? So he goes on. This is a pre-Fortnite era. Budgets for Final Fantasy VII Remake and into Rebirth would have been around this period too. This is important to note, and we will get back to it. There is a misunderstanding that has been repeated for nearly a decade and a half that Square Enix sets arbitrarily high sales requirements, then gets upset when its arbitrarily high sales requirements fail to be met. This was not true when I was there and is unlikely to be true today. I've heard people say that, like, Square Enix expects their franchise to be more successful than they ever will be. Maybe this is specifically about analyst expectations or something. I'm not really sure. I think people are just like, the games appeal to the current fan base and not many other people. It doesn't really grow the fan bases that much. That's at least what I'm seeing from where I'm sitting. Sales expectations generally come from a need to cover the cost of development plus return on investment. If a game costs $100 million to make and it takes 5 years, then you have to beat, as an example, what the business could have returned investing $100 million into the stock market over that period. For the 5 years prior to February of 2024, the stock market averaged a rate of return of 14.5%. Investing that $100 million in the stock market would net you a return of $201 million. So this is our ROI baseline, which makes sense. Like, if you want to justify investing money into a game project, that game needs to make more than the safe investment, which would just be comparatively the stock market. So pretty standard. Like, at the very least, we need to make money in line with what we would have made if we didn't take any risks at all, right? Otherwise, it's just a failure. Can the game net a higher return than this after marketing, platform fees, and discounts are factored in? This is actually a very hard question or equation, though it seems to be simple. The $70 that the consumer pays only returns 49% after the 30% platform fees. And the platforms will generally get a recoup on any funds spent on exclusivity, meaning until they are paid back, they will keep that cash. Plus, discounts start almost immediately. Yeah, on the grand scheme of things, like 3, 4, 5, 6 months after launch, people expect games to go on sale. And so that then takes this 49% cut even lower and even lower and even lower, which is just crazy. Assume marketing expenses at $50 million and assume that you're not going to get $49, but rather an average closer to $40 given discounts, returns, and other aspects. Now let's say in that first month, you sold 3 million copies with $40 net received. We will ignore the recoup. You need to surpass $254 million to make expectations or meet expectations. That's $100 million plus $101 million in the ROI baseline plus $50 million in marketing. At 3 million copies with $40 per copy received, you've only made $120 million. You're far off. Again, this is something we've done with our little napkin math, where I've tried to show you guys that like big projects like AC Shadows, which no doubt have cost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to put together. Like, those games need to sell 7, 8, 9, 10 million copies and probably still sell DLC, season passes, cosmetics just to break even, much less actually returning a profit, which is the only way any of this works. People are often like, well, you're charging $70. How are you not making a profit? It's like, it just doesn't change the math. They could be charging $500 a copy for these games, but if not enough people are buying it, they're still losing money, right? It doesn't matter how much the unit cost is if the volume isn't where it needs to be. He goes on, from the statements made, it will take Final Fantasy 16 18 months to hit expected sales. I use the stock market as an example, but actual ROI should be higher than stock market averages. Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot more risk involved, certainly. And you can see in this post here, Takashi Mochizuki said, Square Enix said Final Fantasy 16 sales fell short of expectations. Initial momentum was in line with expectations, but the game failed to reach fiscal year goal as its momentum slowed. No updates from sales numbers that last announced at 3 million copies. Yeah, and I mean, I saw this on my end where people talked a little bit about it when it launched, and then afterwards they just got distracted with other games. Granted, we had some amazing and huge games. We had like, you know, Baldur's Gate, and then we had like Starfield drop. Like, we had some big games that distracted and pulled people's attention away from Final Fantasy 16 last summer. So I think that had some role to play in it, but I'm sure it's a lot of, you know, moving parts. The sales figures required aren't wild expectations. The number of copies sold were too low, and my numbers are actually much lower than realities. Game dev costs are probably 2 times as high, and marketing is also likely 2 times as high, and this makes the ROI requirements higher too. But that's not even the core of the problem. This is just me proving that expectations aren't set immodestly. The core of the problem is that budgets were set in a period where the expectation was that audiences would grow. Total audience growth was a reasonable expectation in the 2015 to 2022 era and still is today. Not only had the industry grown significantly each year, but each day that new generations were coming of age, they were coming of age as gamers as well, meaning that your total addressable population should be increasing and you should be increasing your revenue. Again, most like of the corporate world is built on growth. If you can't grow, you're shrinking. You know, like it's got to be one. It's got to be one or the other. What's happened, not just to Square Enix, but to the industry as a whole? Audience behavioral patterns are radically different than expected in 2015. Remember, I said in 2015, it was pre-Fortnite. Fortnite is always to blame. The way it used to work was that you'd pick your release date similar to a Hollywood movie, stick to it, and consider the competition to be the titles releasing the weeks before and after. We would look at a Hitman or a Deus Ex release and consider whether there was a Call of Duty or Assassin's Creed coming out around that time, assuming that gamers had X amount of money to spend and Y amount of time. And that if we wanted to get the full sticker price, remember discounts eat into cash received, and also at that time used disc sales were $0 cash received because used copies they didn't get a cut of. So we needed to get as many sales in the first 2 weeks as possible. At that time, as a gamer, once you finished the most recent game you were on, you moved on to the next. You were looking for your next title once you finished the prior one. We wanted one of our titles to be the next title you bought to fill your gamer needs. This world radically changed in the last 6 years. Earlier this month, Kotaku had an article called, quote, 9 great games we can't stop thinking about, end quote. And there's a surprise 10th slide, and that's Fortnite. They write in the article, once again, another weekend arrives, and I realize that I'll be spending most of it playing Fortnite. I'm very close to maxing out both my battle passes and festival passes, so that's the plan. I hate how deep Fortnite has it hooks in me to the point where I'm choosing to play it over brand new cool looking video games, but I can't help it. I must finish these damn passes, get all the rewards, and earn the right to play other stuff. Well, until the next season starts up, and I once again return to Fortnite to drop in and level up all over again. It's sick. I hate myself. I can't wait to play more this weekend. Is this what you guys are like with live service games? It's like, I hate myself. I can't stop. It's like an addict. Wow. I don't really get hooked that way, but I have like whatever the opposite of an addictive personality is, that's what I have. I really struggle to build habits. It's a very difficult thing for me. I know some people can just immediately get hooked into something and then they're like a crack addict. I really, really struggle to make any sort of habit. So I read this and this is like very foreign to me. I don't get this. I don't understand it. It's just not something I've ever experienced, but obviously a lot of people experience it. He goes on, this is indeed the point. And thank you everybody for the super chats and subs and everything. I'll catch up on those in just a minute. I just want to get through this. This is indeed the point. Square Enix are not competing against just the latest new installments. They are competing against every free-to-play online game that is constantly adding content and getting more robust over time. The assumption was that people would jump between products when they finished one, but as you know, free-to-play games like Fortnite or Warzone are evergreen. They never get old. Yeah, no, they never get old in the sense that is being referred to here. I was like, they get very old. These games get super boring, but I get what he means. They're always updating with new content and experiences. They can continue for decades. Candy Crush has had its best years ever the last few years, and companies like Epic can continue to invest back into the products to make them better, creating even higher barriers to entry for competitors. The game industry is still growing in revenue, but that revenue is increasingly captured by fewer live service games that are generating a level of stickiness seen in social media companies. There are reasons there are very few competitors to Facebook. Once the network effect starts, it can keep going for a long time. Since Instagram, almost Facebook, the only real competitor in an entire decade that showed up and could quickly reach 1 billion people was TikTok. And this is in a $1 trillion valued industry. I expect Fortnite, Roblox, Warzone, and similar products to continue to grow revenue. Meanwhile, put yourself in an older gamer's shoes. If you're a gamer with disposable income but less free time, you have the choice of paying $70 to play 100 hours in Final Fantasy 16, or to just continue playing Fortnite with your friends for free. You'll wait to see the Final Fantasy 16 reviews before you decide whether to switch off Fortnite. In other words, your switching costs, how good a game is, how exciting it needs to be, are now substantially higher than when you'd finish the latest Assassin's Creed and look for the next title to fill your time. because you're awash with content options, Fortnite doesn't end. This is the reason we see trends where games are either spectacular 10 out of 10 successes or disasters with little in between. There is no next hit being searched for in many cases, and this polarization makes risks higher and costs higher too. We'll get to that in just a moment. And this is something that we've seen. This is something that we've talked about on this stream too, like where it seems like there is no middle ground. Either a game is the most hyped up thing and everybody's playing it, or nobody's talking about it, it's trash, and we even might revel in its failure, right? And I think Joel Raptor put it well, where he's like, the industry right now is just built around hype. Like each game comes along and we just move from hyped thing to hyped thing to hyped thing, and that's just how it's going. Like we might shift from Pal World, super hyped, or maybe we go back even further. It's like Baldur's Gate 3, it's all anybody talks about. You could go back even further, because even last year it was happening with like Hogwarts Legacy. It was everywhere. All anybody was talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks. And eventually, you know, we get, did anything happen in like May last year? Were there any big games in May? Like April, May of last year? Star Wars Jedi Survivor, I think, came out around that time. And then later in the summer, we got Baldur's Gate 3, which of course was everywhere. And then we got Starfield. And then, of course, we get Pal World, and then we get Helldivers. And in that time, we got a lot of other games, too, that did not blow up. Oh, Tears of the Kingdom, of course. Yeah, how could I forget that? Yeah, Tears of the Kingdom came out. So in that time, there were also a lot of other games that came out, but that just flopped or didn't meet expectations. But were good games. They just didn't click with anybody, right? Resident Evil 4 remake, exactly. Like, we moved from hyped thing to hyped thing to hyped thing. And if you weren't one of those hyped things, you're done. And it didn't used to necessarily be that way. It used to be that you could have like an 8 out of 10 review score and still pop off, like still do very, very well. And there have been some instances of games that didn't review great, but still met expectations. One of the most recent ones was, I actually just saw the numbers on this. The reviews were really, really poor, actually. But the game apparently did like pretty well, and that was South Park Snow Day. Like apparently this game, even though it got torn up in reviews, people still bought it. Like a lot of people still bought it, which is crazy. Like Alone in the Dark was considered a flop, but this game was actually considered a success. It did what it was expected to do. It did well enough, which is crazy. Yeah, it's South Park, which certainly helped. If this was any other franchise, I don't think it would have done well. But this is an example of how you can technically have games that review not great, but that still could perform well. But it's certainly rare. It's certainly rare. Now, if you're a younger gamer in your teens, you may not even be thinking about Final Fantasy. If you're 13 years old now, you were 5 years old when the last mainline Final Fantasy 15, came out. Yeah, let that settle in. Your family may not own a PS5 and you may not care. You're satisfied with Fortnite or Roblox or Minecraft with your friends on your phone or laptop. I'm not saying that this is the case for everyone, but it certainly is a trend. I can attest to this. My little brother, Eli, I hooked him up. I got him a PS5 because his PS4 died and stopped working. So I got him a PS5 and he only plays like Fortnite and Roblox, and occasionally will boot up Spider-Man because he likes Spider-Man. But like, that's it. And he's like 14 now, or about to be 14. So like, I can attest to this, that this is a thing. Like, this is certainly a thing. I don't know broad trends, what the rest of the teen demographic looks like, but I certainly know that there's a lot of kids that are like that. The old AAA franchises do not seem to be converting the younger generations that the industry was counting on for growth, and instead, free-to-play social games on mobile are where they spend their time. This is the biggest thing. They're not converting them over, and that's the part that's going to be really, really tough to shift, because there's an entire generation of gamers that are used to getting their games for free and having all their friends play it and playing on whatever platform they want. That's why, like, I know it's easy for us us old geezers to dismiss like the Xbox vision of the future, where they're like, oh no, everything's going to be playable on your phone. You're not even going to need a console. Everything's going to be xCloud through your phone. That's going to be the key. For us, that sounds ridiculous. But for an entire younger generation that's used to playing Roblox on their phone and used to just playing Fortnite on their phone with their friends, and then they pull it up on their PlayStation, that stuff, for them, that actually is like a solid and valuable offering, which is crazy, but that's the thing. Yeah, Xbox has a vision. Yeah, I think a lot of people, their frustration with Xbox is they don't agree with the vision, but their vision and their pitch is basically that the games industry has changed and that they are going to try to target who will be the main gaming community in 10 years, which is that younger generation, the generation that grew up for as long as they can remember on Fortnite. Which is crazy that there's going to be a generation that never knew a world really without Fortnite. But that really is where we're at. I mean, that's how the industry is shifting. And it has fundamentally changed players' expectations. Because again, why would you spend $70 on a new game when you could just go play Lego Fortnite? Or Battle Royale Fortnite? Or Creative Build Mode in Fortnite? Or any of the other different modes. They have like basically a freaking Rocket League now in that. Like, why would you go buy a standalone game that you might like, might not, when you could just go back to Fortnite, which is free? Granted, they've spent hundreds of dollars on skins, but it's because the psychology is different. When you get a game for free and you spend money on it, you feel like you're thanking the developers for making a good game. Whereas when you buy a game for cash and then the game comes out and it's like, or it's pretty good, you just feel like you got, at the very least, the bare minimum of what you were expecting. When in reality, like, they delivered the product they sold to you, but when it's free up front and it's pretty good but not amazing, you don't feel like they just met you where they should have been. You feel like, well, this is pretty good. This is way better than it should be for a free game. So I'll give them money to say thank you effectively. I can justify spending money on skins because I got it for free. You know, it's a small psychological switch, but it's a powerful one. He continues, this is the reason every publisher chased the live service titles. Audiences clearly gravitated towards them and profits followed in success. It is surprising that Square Enix, which had successful free-to-play live service mobile titles in Japan, left the AAA live service attempts to Eidos rather than try to build those products in Japan. But dissecting this problem would likely require an entirely different thread. I would be interested in that thread, though, for real. Regardless, the Fortniteization of the industry was not entirely predictable in 2015 when budgets were being planned. Even after Fortnite came out and well into the COVID period, it felt like industry growth was pulling all ships forward, not just a handful. But that isn't what happened. Now we have to get to the cost of development. Asset generation, motion capture, textures, animation, engineering, infrastructure are incredibly expensive, making games cost a lot of money. The recent layoff wave is generally a consolidation towards a new expected sales average in the number of titles being produced, not the cost of an individual title, which is going to continue to increase. Remember, Spider-Man 2 cost an estimated $380 million. Development costs have gone up, and switching costs of the consumers have gone up. And as a result, companies have to invest even more because it has to be a 10 out of 10 or gamers will just stick to Fortnite. I don't mean literally Fortnite, but similar titles or products. Yeah, stickiness is the big thing. Like, it's why social media companies can be so valuable because once a customer is used to a certain app, they won't really shift because you're shifting entire behaviors. If you watch a lot of Twitch, it's really hard to get you to switch from Twitch to Mixer or from Twitch to Kick or to YouTube. Like, it can be tough. The only way that they typically can do it is if they pull like the one content creator that you watch over to that new platform, and then you get people shifting over. But even then, there's a lot of people that don't follow them over because they're so entrenched in just the platform. And imagine now that you've spent hundreds of dollars on like skins. You've spent hundreds of hours playing this one game, and a company's trying to get you to pull over and try something else. You know, that's quite difficult. It's why it's never really made sense that companies think they could just come along and be like, here's a new live service game, enjoy. It's like, no, it has to be so good that not only do I want to move over to it, but I have to be able to convince my friends to leave the game that they've poured so much money and time into. And we have to move from that game over to this new game because it's so good. Like, that has to be a very special game to achieve that. And it's very, very difficult. Very difficult. Even long term. I mean, even now you're seeing player numbers for something like Helldivers 2. You're even seeing player numbers for that start to drop. Granted, I would argue that PlayStation has made a few mistakes that have helped this along. But you look in the last 3 months, I mean, lots of people playing it, and it's just settled lower and lower and lower and lower. Now it's like in the 50 to 60,000 player range, which is still very good for a live service game. And this is just PC, but like, that's far from Call of Duty numbers. It's far from Destiny numbers. It's far from Valorant numbers, you know, because a lot of players are just hitting a wall with Helldivers, and then they're choosing to go and play something like Call of Duty or a Fortnite that they also have treated as their main like live service game home that they return to all the time. With that, meanwhile, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which has a 92% Metacritic rating, can't get the sales it needs, though it's also complicated due to it being a sequel. These factors mean the status quo must change. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what they've been doing is not working, so they've got to do something different. There are 3 layers you can pull to make the equation work, or levers you can pull to make the equation work for return on investment at a game company. You can decrease costs, increase price, or increase audience size. You got to do one of them. You could also tweak it and just say the price is the amount of money taken from each player, which you could do either by charging more, getting more money up front with like deluxe editions, gold editions, whatever, or with like paid cosmetics and stuff like that. So decrease costs, get more money from players, or increase the audience, but keep the other things the same. And that should work, right? As noted, any non-live service game is having trouble increasing audience size. Meanwhile, on the cost side, inflation is up, salaries are up, and consumers require sophisticated, beautiful products to get them to fork over cash rather than keep playing free-to-play titles. It is true that there are many smaller games or less beautiful games that generate audiences and are profitable, but something like Balatro is not a good example to point to. It's made by one person. AAA games can take hundreds or even thousands of people to make. A single person making $2 to $3 million in sales is life-changing. 100 people trying to split that is not enough money. And products like Balatro are lightning in a bottle. You can't generally capture that twice. And there are hundreds of thousands of competing products on Steam or app stores that fail for every instance of something like Balatro. I think it's also, this is the same reason why it triggers me when people are like, yeah, they're struggling to find success. Meanwhile, look at something like Stardew Valley. Yeah, Stardew Valley is amazing. We all agree. We've all put way more time than we'd care to admit into Stardew Valley. But Stardew Valley is exceptional in the purest sense of the word. Exception. All. It is an exception to the rule. Most games that are put together by one dude and are little passion projects never see the light of day. There's the famous example of like the Scott Cawthon guy who made Five Nights at Freddy's. He wanted to give up on game development because he had been making games for years that never found an audience. And then he put out Five Nights at Freddy's as like one final little, we'll try this. And he tossed it out. And then all of a sudden YouTubers started playing it. And the game's absolutely exploded. And now it's like, you know, they have a movie, they have all sorts of crazy stuff happening from it. But the first part of his story is where most devs find themselves. They work their asses off, put together beautiful little art pieces, and they never really find or connect with an audience. It would be great if the world were just like, you know, the indie scene were such that good games would always find audiences. And sometimes that's true, but also there's a lot of really good games out there that never find audiences. They might find 200, 300, 400 people to play them. They get a few hundred Steam reviews, but that's about it. And like they said, even when they are very successful, $2 to $3 million for that one person is life-changing. For Ubisoft or for a big company making a big project, that would be considered a catastrophic failure. So it's just not really fair to directly compare them. This leaves only price left as a lever to pull. Since the price of games hasn't substantially increased relative to inflation, packaged disc games have gotten cheaper over the last 2 decades. The assumption was that this was okay because the audience size would grow instead of price, but the audience went to the platform titles. Prices for packaged disc games will go up. Game companies have no choice. It is the only lever left. Just look at Kotaku's article about GTA 6's price point from this week. And this is why I've said, like, maybe Take-Two just charges $70, but then they do like 5-day early access for GTA 6 for $110 or something. I wouldn't be surprised if they just introduce a flat new starter price and they're like, yep, it's $100. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that, frankly, because they will get away with it. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If they did that and they were like, yep, GTA 6 is $100, GTA 6 is $150, whatever. I mean, up to like $200-300. I think whatever they said they were charging, people would still buy it in droves. And if you don't think that's the case, I don't think you understand how big GTA 6 is going to be. I'm telling you right now, they could tell you that, like, okay, you also need to give us a DNA sample to play the game early, and people will do it. Like, people will go so hard for this game. It will be the biggest pop culture event relative to gaming ever. It will be huge. You can't even fathom it. Just because you wouldn't buy it for $100 or $150 does not mean that the vast majority of teenagers, high schoolers, college kids, they're all going to be doing it because it's going to be the cool thing. Like, it's going to be a social thing. You know, the second there's a way where they would do it where, like, yeah, it's $100 for GTA 6 or it's $150 for GTA 6, whatever it is. Kids in high school will be like bullied if they didn't buy it because, oh, so you're poor. Yeah, you're poor now. It's going to be like so toxic, but Take-Two won't care because they'll still get the revenue and people will still buy it. So if anybody could do it, GTA 6 would be the one to do it. And Take-Two Interactive, the parent company of Rockstar, if I'm not mistaken, they were the first company to charge $70 for a game with like NBA 2K, I think 21 or 22. So they were the first ones to do the $70 thing. So who's to say they won't be the first one to do the $100 game? $150 game. Like, it's going to be insane. And I'm just telling you right here, right now, it's going to be insane. Does that mean that every AAA game will get away with charging that? No. Like, I think if you saw a lot of other games come out and try to do that, I think you'd see a lot of resistance from players. Because frankly, and this might come as a shock to these these corporate overlords, $100, $150 is a lot of freaking money. And not many people have that. And in fact, for GTA 6, this would represent like people selling other games that they've been sitting on, people saving up for weeks, months to prepare to purchase GTA 6 because it'll be such an exceptional release, like a once in a decade, once every 15-year thing. And people are going to do it. But I don't think they will do that regularly. Like, that's the problem is if these companies think that they could then, oh, well, we'll charge $150 for the next Assassin's Creed and we'll charge $100 for this game and for that game. Like, I don't think people are going to bite that. I think they would care more about GTA 6 and be willing to do exceptional things for GTA 6 because it is in and of itself exceptional. But that won't stop them from trying, no doubt. The other way they do that is with boosting like DLC, season passes, paid cosmetics, stuff like that. So I could see GTA 6 doing something similar to what they've done in the past where they might have unique skins for pre-ordering. You know, I think they'll do early access, certainly. You know, even if they release it at $70 for the base version, I think they'll do a $50 or a 5-day early access for it or something, a full week of early access. And that will be locked behind the deluxe $150 edition or something like that. And you'll be shocked at how many people pay it. People will find that out and they will save up for months. So just wait. It's going to be insane. It's going to be insane. Like, and they're going to get away with it. That's what's perhaps most frustrating. But they're going to get away with it. You're also seeing this trend with Ubisoft's Star Wars game. It's not because game companies are penny pinchers looking to fleece their users. It's because this is the only path left to make non-free-to-play service titles workable in the AAA space, given costs and competition. Specifically, this is referring to the multiple different editions that they have, where it's like $70, 110, 130 or 40. And this is why, like, I also get frustrated when people just throw out like, this is greed. In my view, greed as a definition, let's look it up. In my view, greed refers to like wanting more, like here, Webster's dictionary, a selfish and excessive desire for more of something such as money than is needed. So greed is when you don't just want what's needed, but you want more than that, right? You're like, I need $70 to buy this new game, and I give you $70, and then you're like, can I actually get like 80 or 90? That's greed. You want more than you need. When we're talking about just paying the bare minimum costs and breaking even, that's not greed. By definition, it's not greed. It's perhaps desperate. It's perhaps cringe. But by definition, it's not greedy. I would say what like EA or like Scopely with Monopoly Go, what they do is greed. That is certainly greed. They're not just paying costs. They're not breaking even. They're making billions of dollars in profit, right? On sports games, on mobile games that are basically just slot machines, stuff like that. That is greed. Without a doubt. When you're talking about like something like Star Wars Outlaws, where they've had hundreds and hundreds of employees working for years on a game, and then they have to raise these prices in this way to try and break even, not even making a profit, just break even, that is by definition not greed. You can not like it, that's fine. You don't have to like it, but it's not the same thing as like what Scopely does with mobile games. And so it always frustrates me when people just say, oh, well, it's corporate greed. Some of this stuff absolutely is corporate greed. Other cases are them just trying to break even because these games are so expensive to make. He continues, there's another path that I can think of, which is increasing the take rate. If publishers can capture more of the platform side revenue, they can moderate price point increases while capturing a better return on investment because they'll be capturing, say, $50, $55 or $50 or $55 out of 70. Tim Sweeney from Epic knows this is why he's fighting the good fight on the platform fees, both EGS and with the App Store fees to open up PC and mobile ecosystems. This is why you'll see Microsoft and others take advantage of his fight and start their own app stores. You would think Microsoft would chip in for Epic's legal fees given they're capturing the benefits with no risk. True. Yeah, no, that makes sense. But this path will take time, and is very hard on consoles where the AAA publishers make a lot of their money. So expect price increases to still be the norm. All told, I think it's a fantastic thread breaking this down, and hopefully it shines a new light for some people on a lot of this stuff that maybe would have otherwise been more difficult to put into perspective. Because again, I think a lot of people think these companies are actually like they're making stupid amounts of money on something like, I don't know, an Avatar Frontiers of Pandora or something. But when you look at it as a single product, it will take a lot to break even, much less make a profit. And so when I see them trying to increase the average price from consumers or amount of money taken from consumers, I see it as a sign of desperation, and I think it can make the game actively worse. But I don't think it fits into the like dictionary definition of greed, because they're not looking for more than is needed. Of course, ideally they'd get more than is needed, but they're just trying to break even, and they're failing at that, which is why you're seeing a lot of projects canceled, layoffs, all sorts of stuff happen, because it's not working. So we'll see what happens in the next few years, of course, but I think that there's a big problem going on within the industry, and the industry is very different from what it was even just like 7, 8, 9 years ago. It's very, very different, and a lot of it's because of huge games like Fortnite, Warzone. The free-to-play push has really changed player expectations, and things like Game Pass have also changed player expectations. Now you're having people that look at games that are pretty good and they're going, it looks fine, but I'll wait till it comes to Game Pass. So they're not buying it, which causes the game to flop because they didn't make enough money from it, because people are like, well, it'll go to Game Pass when they're desperate enough. And I think it's one of the unintended consequences. It's called an externality of Microsoft's business decisions. You know, it's the old example of an externality would be something like, you know, a company is dumping toxic sludge into a pit on property that they own, right? They're like, we own this land, we can dump toxic sludge into the pit and bury it. Who cares? It's our land, it's our sludge. We dumped it there. It's fine. But there's an externality about that, or with that, where all of a sudden that seeps into the groundwater and then it poisons the town nearby, right? That's an externality of that initial decision, because it's not just about that isolated bubble. There are sometimes effects from your practices and from what you do that spills out and affects everybody else. And I use that as a classic example because it's an actual thing that happened. I forget the name of the town, but yeah, it was an actual thing that happened, and it like destroyed an entire neighborhood. It was a whole thing. it was a bit of a rough one. So yeah, anyway, Black Requiem. This is why I like you. As someone getting his master's in econ, understanding externalities is great. Yeah. It's with all this, it's really, really easy to boil the gaming industry down to big company wanting money bad, eat the rich, everything sucks, play World of Warcraft or something. But it's like, it's more complicated than that. And I'm like, if people want more of these like AAA scale, big budget games, they have to buy them. Because if you don't, you're going to see companies needing to fix the equation some other way with live service components, with microtransactions, with all that stuff, because otherwise the math just doesn't work. But we have this community or this industry where we're kind of split. There's some people that are willing to purchase games that are good but not necessarily great because they want to support them, and they have the cash where they can actually do that. And then you have other gamers that are the types that will just be like, well, I'm just going to keep playing my free-to-play live service game, and you got to do something really amazing to pull me out of that, or I'll just wait till it comes to Game Pass. And so you have value-oriented gamers that are much less willing to spend money compared to what they would have done 10 years ago, which I think is what's jarring these big companies a lot more.